Using a 19mm socket, go ahead and remove your lug nuts. With the lug nuts removed, we'll go ahead and remove the wheel, set that aside. Go ahead and open up your hood, grab this cover right here, gently pull upward. Set this aside. Use a 10mm socket or a wrench, and go ahead and loosen the ground terminal here. Go ahead and remove that, set that aside. I'm going to go ahead and put the ignition key in. Turn it to the on position, allowing us to have full motion to turn the steering wheel without draining the battery. Using our 10mm socket, we're going to remove our nuts that are securing our ABS wire here. Loosen and remove these, take the brackets off. And grab the wheel. You can manually rotate this. Get into this back bolt here. Rotate the wheel back. Let's go ahead and remove this bracket right here that's holding our brake flex line. On the low part of our strut at the top of our clevis, there is a 14mm bolt. Let's go ahead and remove that bolt. On the bottom clevis fork here to the lower control arm, there's a 17mm bolt with a 17mm nut. Let's go ahead and remove the nut from the bolt using a wrench and socket. Go ahead and work that bolt out. Let's see if we can grab our clevis fork here and remove this off of the strut. And the upper control arm here, I want to go ahead and remove the cotter pin. Use your pliers and straighten this out if you can. And try and pull this out. Okay, remove that unit. Using a 17mm socket, let's go ahead and remove this nut right here. I want to leave it on the stud a few threads. Now I want to try and separate the upper control arm ball joint from the knuckle itself. We're going to use a hammer and strike this side right here, try and get this to separate. that separated. Let's go ahead and use our ratchet again. This nut here is supporting this knuckle itself, so be prepared when this comes off. The knuckle can swing out and away, so be careful with that. Now with that nut removed from our upper control arm to our knuckle, I use a small bungee cord just to support the knuckle with all the brakes and everything, still to the upper control arm, but that way there we can get access to our strut assembly. Now underneath the hood, we're going to go ahead and grab our under engine covers. Gently lift up, please away. Going to pop our trim pieces up and off. And we just work this off. This is going to give us access to our upper strut mounts right here. I'm going to remove our two 12mm bolts for our cross tower brace here. On the driver's side, we're going to go ahead and release this cover here. It's going to give us access to the driver's side strut tower brace and our strut bolts here. When doing struts, it is always recommended to go ahead and do them in pairs. On the back side of the strut tower brace, there is a 10mm bolt here. I'm going to go ahead and remove this. Remove that 10mm bolt. Remove our strut tower bolts here, or nuts. Get those off there. We're going to use a smaller pry bar. Again, work our strut tower brace up. I'm going to release this from the driver's side as well. Using a 17mm deep socket, we're going to go ahead and remove the 3 nuts supporting the strut. The strut will drop out once you get the 3rd nut loose, so you can reach around underneath the fender, grab that strut. Now, installing a strut, you want to identify what position the studs are being positioned in. The 3 large ones support the strut. The 3 little ones support the strut cross tower brace. So you want to make sure that these line up. Feed this up into place. Grab one of the nuts while you're holding the strut in place. And thread them down as far as you can. That's going to help you get the other ones installed. I'm going to torque down our upper strut bolts to 44 foot-pounds. Now, installing your strut tower brace here, I'm going to go ahead and get everything lined up. We're going to get all of our bolts and nuts set into place. You don't want to torque these down until the vehicle has all the tires on it, and go ahead and lower it down to the ground on level ground. We're going to install our 10mm bolts on the back on the passenger side here. And repeat for the driver's side. Now that the vehicle has the wheels on it and it's on level ground, we're going to go ahead and tighten down all of our torque strut components. Install our little hose bracket right here. We're going to go ahead and install our clevis fork here. We did clean up the inside of the clevis fork and we applied a light coat of grease on there. I'm going to use a small pry bar just in the back here. I'm going to try and work this clevis fork back and forth, help that slide on. So on the back side of the clevis fork is a split so you can put your bolt through. I used a screwdriver, but you can use a pry bar as well. And I just drove it down to kind of open up the clevis split in a little bit, in the back here a little bit. And then we're just gonna go ahead and tap the clevis fork up. On the back side of the clevis fork, there is a notch that needs to line up with the notch on the back side of the strut itself. So you might have to rotate this using a pair of large channel locks or something to get that to line up with that. On the back side of our strut and our clevis pin notch, that little tab fit right in there perfect. Let's now go ahead and put in our clevis pin fork bolt here. Let's go ahead and snug that down. And torque this bolt to 32 foot-pounds. Let's go ahead and remove our bungee cord that we have supporting this. Use our pry bar on the upper portion of the control arm. Just going to hook this on to the coil spring, line this up. And go ahead and get our upper ball joint nut started here. And slowly release that suspension. Let's go ahead and tighten down that nut. And when tightening this down, this is a castle nut. So the little notch that is in between these little tabs is where you're going to want to place your cotter pin. So you have to line up one of these notches here with the hole that is in the ball joint. So we're going to grab our ratchet and we're going to tighten this up a little bit more, and it will torque it, and then we'll line up our slot for the cotter pin. I'm going to take our cotter pin, I'm going to line it up, and just going to go right through this notch here, through the other side. Go ahead and bend this over. Take your cutters, and you can cut off any excess here. Install our bolt in. Install our nut. We'll snug that down and we'll go ahead and get that torqued into place. I'm going to torque down our clevis bolt to 47 foot-pounds. Let's go ahead and install our rear trim panel here. Install our driver's side trim. On your original cover here, you probably had a plastic clip right here. Ours may have had one at one time, but it was missing when we got the car. Line up our plastic pins. Install our ABS wire bracket here. Let's get that nut started. Right here. Install one of our 10mm bolts. Install our other bolt down below here. And install our bolt for our ABS sensor right here. Just going to snug that down gently. And repeat for the other bolts. Looks like our bracket came loose a little bit here. This little tab needs to be inside the control arm. Just reposition that, pop that up and in. There we go. Install our flex line bracket. And just snug those down. Let's go ahead and install your wheel. Get our lug nuts all started by hand first, and then we'll snug those down. We'll go ahead and torque our lug nuts to 80 foot-pounds. Go ahead and grab your negative terminal, put that on. We'll go ahead and snug up our battery. Once that's on, go ahead and grab your cover, line that up, pop this into place.